Ziokuo, 1 serving of braised pork on the second table. Okay, a crisp and melodious voice came from the room inside. The thin woman in the room looked like she had 3 heads and 6 arms, chopping vegetables, igniting fire, and serving seasonings. She moved very flexibly. After sending off the last table of guests, Qin Ziokuo could finally sit down and have a good rest. Although she is a healer, she can replenish her energy at any time, but she can't resist being busy all day. She rubbed her waist and stood up, looking at the tableware and chopsticks that were piled up like small hills around her. She thought about it. I'd better wash it tomorrow. When the tired Ziokuo turned to turn off the lights, she didn't notice that the lights that were supposed to go out suddenly flickered. A bit. He went back to the room and washed briefly before going to bed. Before going to bed, he turned his head and glanced out of the window. It was very foggy and desolate. 3 years ago, Qin Ziokuo was a senior who was graduating soon. When Ziokuo and her classmates majoring in agricultural science and technology were on a graduation trip, they were suddenly swept away by an outbreak of zombie virus. Ziokuo, who was alone, was discovered by the soldiers of the national camp by accident. A few days after she was brought back to the camp, people around her suddenly had supernatural powers. Ziokuo also hoped to have supernatural powers by her side, but it backfired. The dozen people who were rescued, except for themselves, all had supernatural abilities. Ziokuo was secretly anxious. After all, this was the end of the world. Before she was rescued, she saw the dark side of human beings outside, eating living people without food, and eating useless people without supernatural powers. Possession and bullying of supernatural powers, the law is now a cloud, and no one can guarantee what will happen in the next moment. So I thought of using my profession and the cooking skills I learned from the chef's father to open a small restaurant by myself. The food was scarce, and Ziokuo cultivated various vegetables according to his professional cultivation. In this era of only eating compressed biscuits, Ziokuo's restaurant stood on its heels with green vegetables and beautiful colors and flavors. In the past 3 years, Ziokuo has not given up looking for her parents, but there is no news. Ziokuo dare not think if something has happened. In the second year of the apocalypse, Ziokuo suddenly had an ability. Originally, I wanted to follow the soldiers in the camp to find my parents with supernatural powers, but my supernatural powers were only a primary healing system. It's a very tasteless ability. When you go out and encounter zombies, you will give it for nothing. Ziokuo wanted to improve her abilities in the following days, but it was just like the destiny, and she was still at the elementary level after 2 years. I stayed in this camp for 3 years like this. It is very safe. It is the largest camp in the world and has the most versatile weapons. Because of the comfortable atmosphere in the camp, Xiaoguo doesn't need to be afraid for the past 3 years. It's just that his temper is getting more and more withdrawn, and he almost only revolves around Onet herd of his own land. Not long ago, a power user who went out brought back unfortunate news. They found their parents, but they had turned into zombies, so they killed them, and then found a quiet place to bury them. Ziokuo accepted the news calmly. She was very sad, but what can I do? In this way, Ziokuo continued her daily life in a daze. She didn't know when she would be like this, and she didn't know what to do next. I can only devote all my energy to cooking and growing vegetables, thinking about cultivating new varieties of vegetables every day, or researching the taste of vegetables, raising chickens, ducks, and pigs found in the camp, and so on day after day. Year after year. Feeling that Ziokuo, who had just fallen asleep, was woken up by a vigorous swaying, she stumbled upon hearing a tender cry in her ear, the mother-in-law's cry. Very tired, Ziokuo couldn't get her eyes open to look at the source of the sound. She secretly thought that she shouldn't. I'm tired today, but I haven't gotten to this point. Her eyes seemed to be stuck with glue, and her whole body was soft. She felt like she was about to float, Tofivi. The already uncomfortable Ziokuo's arms were constantly swaying, and there was a whimpering cry in her ears, and she felt like she was about to faint. At this time, there was someone calling her mother, and Zyokuo used her last strength to say, "Who is your mother?" Dazed Zyokuo felt like she had a long dream. In the dream, she was born in a woman in Dahua village in Shao Kingdom 42 years ago 3000 years ago. The woman is also called Qin Zyokuo. She married from Kinswang to Dahua village 3 years ago. Not only is he tall and mighty, but also has a good face. Many matchmakers have been staring at him to introduce him to him when he is an adult, and Qin Zyokuo is also well known in the village. So in this era when eating was a problem, Qin Zyokuo was married to a man she had never met with a bag of grain. Qin Zyokuo worshipped with a headscarf covered, and then sat in the bridal room and waited for the bridegroom to come in and pick a hijab. After the wedding night, the sound of gongs and drums was heard outside at the dawn of the day. Before Qin Zyokuo could get up, suddenly 2 men in military uniforms rushed in and grabbed the man who had just woken up. "Go!" Before Qin Zyokuo could recover from the shock, she heard the cry of her new mother-in-law from outside, "No, no, 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 my son has just gotten married, and he hasn't stayed yet, please do it, let it go. He's back. Auntie, every man from every family has to go there. There is only one man in your family. If you don't arrest him, who will you arrest?" Hearing her mother-in-law's heart-wrenching cry, Qin Zyokuo knew that she was recruiting strong men to join the army. Thinking that Zyokuo quickly got up and put on some clothes, she ran out, hugged her mother-in-law who was kneeling in the yard, and looked at the back of the man who was taken away by the official. "Take care of yourself and Zyokuo, and wait for him to come back." One after another, the officials pressed out young men from all over the village, and there were cries one after another, the old people, the women, and the children. Living to find a job, this is a matter of honoring the ancestors. After talking, he directed the army out of the village. Except for the old man who took a step and panted 3 times, all the men in the village were captured. In an instant, only the old and weak were left in Peach Blossom village. Zyokuo helped her mother-in-law into the house. "Mother! Zyokuo, your belly is so good, it's all pointing at your belly." My mother-in-law was out of breath when she cried. She said that, but she didn't know what to do in her heart. After all, it was only one night. Zyokuo felt a lot of pressure, and listening to her mother-in-law's crying, she couldn't help but feel frightened. This time, she was taken away to join the army. In fact, it was very bad luck and few of them were able to come back from the battlefield. She just got married, and the man after being taken away, I was left with my mother-in-law, and. Thinking of this, Xiaoguo looked at her belly and wondered if she had. After a man is captured and joined the army will give his family a tael of silver as compensation every month. This is also evidence that the family knows that the person is still alive. The same is true for Qin Zyokuo. As long as there is money every month, it means that he is not dead yet. There is more or less comfort in my heart, and there is hope. I don't know if it was the success of my mother-in-law's prayers or Qin Zyokuo's belly, but I was pregnant that night. Now my mother-in-law, who is full of sadness, also has hope. She doesn't need Zyokuo to do the big and small work at home, so she can raise the baby with peace of mind. And Zyokuo did not disappoint. On the day of giving birth, a big fat boy was born smoothly. The happy mother-in-law was happy for 3 days without closing her mouth. The child grew up day by day, and the army money was delivered on time. And the days to come are slowly getting better. But on that day, the money that should have been delivered was not delivered. I knew that someone might have made a mistake, and my mother-in-law fell ill. Although she was mentally prepared, she really couldn't accept it at this moment. Coupled with the famine at that time, he died before he survived. Qin Zyokuo held back her grief and finished the funeral for her mother-in-law. Before she was immersed in grief, she had to work hard to eat and drink. Catching up with the severe drought, the crops would not grow and harvest, and those who had some money in the family would also go to the county town. Buy some food, and the food in the city has been sold for sky-high prices. Xiaoqiu also has no money, so she has to take her 3-year-old son, and eat a hungry meal every day. Soon the fat child becomes dry and thin, and Xiaoqiu often eats more to make the child eat more. I didn't eat a meal for 3 or 4 days, so I became hungry. Finally, the situation improved. It rained, there was water in the river, and the ground became wet. Every household was better off. When I was going to go out to find something to eat early one morning, I fell down, and I died without taking a breath. At this moment, Xiaoguo's eyebrows moved, and the child standing beside the bed shouted excitedly, "Mother! Woohoo, wake up! Mom woohoo!" Xiaoqiu, who couldn't stand the sound of crying, opened her tired eyes and slowly looked at the child who was hugging her. After seeing it clearly, Xiaoqiu, who was frightened, woke up at once. "Where's the little black monkey?" The little boy pouted as if he was wronged, and cried to Xiaoqiu, "Mother!" Qin Xiaoqiu looked at the little black monkey in front of her in disbelief. She couldn't believe that the dreams were real. Those memories were experienced by this body. This body has just passed away, and she left the apocalypse. After coming to this body, he was still married and had a baby. "Mother!" A cautious voice came from beside him, and the boy became more and more uneasy when he saw his mother's strange expression. Could it be that he fell over his head? "Mum Wu, are you all right? What should I do if something happens to my mother?" The little man said in a milky voice, "Mum, I won't eat so much in the future, I can also go out to find something to eat." The young child thinks that he has eaten too much, so the mother will fall down when she is not full, and it is all her fault. Xiaoqiu looked back at the boy who was crying suddenly. "Hey, don't cry." She really didn't know how to get along with the child, looking at the crying child, thinking about his name, Zhang. Zhang? Zhang. Qingguan. Xiaoqiu carefully called out his name. The boy who was crying and couldn't help himself heard his mother calling his name, and stopped crying instantly. Only when he was in trouble would his mother call his name. "Mother!" Hearing such a soft voice calling her mother, Xiaoqiu's heart was a complete mess. "Zhuang Zhuang, mother is fine, don't worry about mother." Xiaoqiu just remembered that when he was born, her mother-in-law called him Zhuang Zhuang in order to make him grow strong. But now, I'm dry, thin, and dirty. Hey, I didn't expect that a big girl of mine would have such a big cheap son. Murmur murmur. Xiaoqiu listened to the protest from her stomach. Hungry, this body hadn't eaten for 3 days. Xiaoqiu clutched her stomach and was about to get out of bed to find something to eat. Before she could get off her feet, her head buzzed. About to fall to the ground, Xiaoqiu hurriedly held on to the edge of the bed to avoid falling, but she was taken aback by watching Xiaoqiu's zhuang zhuang, so she quickly rushed to Xiaoqiu, holding Xiaoqiu tightly with both hands. Clothes. Apparently, she was frightened by the fall, for fear that her mother would have another accident. "Don't be afraid of zhuang zhuang, mother just didn't stand firm, it's all right." Xiaoqiu gently stroked Zhuang Zhuang's back. "I'll support my mother," the child said to Xiaoqiu firmly and seriously. "It is good." Xiaoqiu followed Zhuang Zhuang to her kitchen, looked at the empty grain bags, and thought carefully about what she had eaten before. Before the famine, there was rice noodles, but after that, she went out to dig wild vegetables to satisfy her hunger. Empty. After rummaging around, Xiaoqiu finally found a grain bag with a handful of rice in it. But now every grain of rice is so precious. Xiaoqiu happily grabbed the rice grain and sprinkled it into the pot, then added water and set it on fire. On the other side, Zhuang Zhuang, who was closely following Xiaoqiu, looked at his mother's actions with a little hesitation. "Mother, didn't you say that this food will not be taken out until it is absolutely necessary?" The original owner said before that this food was prepared for Zhuang Zhuang to prevent accidents, but now Xiaoqiu feels that if she doesn't eat anything, the 2 mothers and children will definitely starve to death. Strong, now more important. Well, that's right, now is the time of last resort. Shall we eat porridge? Zhuang was also fascinated by the word porridge. He hadn't had porridge for a long time. He still remembered that it was very fragrant and fragrant. Thinking about it, he tapped his mouth, nodded slowly, and said hello. Xiaoqiu rubbed his head, it was sticky, and it seemed that she would boil water to give him a bath in a while. As soon as they spoke, the water boiled, and the fragrance of rice wafted out from the gap of the pot lid. The two of them couldn't help smelling the fragrance and sighed in relief. The two looked at each other embarrassedly when they heard the voice, and laughed out loud. Xiaoqiu stood up and glanced around, thinking if she could make a vegetable porridge with oil and vegetables, but in the end she only found a wild vegetable and a fingernail-sized lard left in the oil tank. He washed the wild vegetables, chopped them into pieces with a knife, then threw them into the pot together with the lard, and stirred them with a spoon. One big and one small did not take a bowl, and drank while guarding the pot stand. The first sip she took in, Xiaoqiu felt warm all over her body, she had some strength in her limbs with rice soup in her appetite, and Zhuang even more so. After drinking vegetable soup for a long time, she just took a mouthful of porridge and was happy. I don't know how to express it, so I can only express my joy by looking at Xiaoqiu with big eyes. Xiaoqiu put down the spoon and burped a big full stomach, touched her stomach and said, "It's very comfortable." After eating this spoonful of porridge, my body, which felt a great loss, suddenly became a lot more stable. Zhuang watched his mother put down the spoon, and put down the spoon in his hand, and sent it to Xiaoqiu's spoon tremblingly, "Mother, eat it." Xiaoqiu was very moved. The 3-year-old child was obviously not full, but he let his mother eat it first. Xiaoqiu looked at Zhuang lovingly, "Nice Zhuang, my mother is full and can't eat any more." Zhuang thought for a while with his little head, but still said, "Mother, I can't eat it either." Xiaoqiu nodded his head, and pretended to be angry and said, "Why, what mother makes is so bad." No, mother's cooking is the best, even better than grandma's." Zhuang said anxiously to his mother, for fear that he would not believe his words. Xiaoqiu smiled and rubbed his head, "Drink." Zhuang nodded his head and made a loud noise to indicate that the food was delicious. In fact, what he said was right. The one who cooked before was always grandma. It's tasteless, it turns out that my mother's cooking is so delicious. Zhuang licked the spoon clean, then burped a huge burp, and then smiled shyly at the mother. Mother Xiaoqiu felt like she was about to melt, she was so cute, whether it was when she just ate or when she called her mother with a red face and milky voice, "Are you full?" Xiaoqiu saw that there was still a lot of water and firewood in the water tank, so she prepared to boil water for Zhuang and take a bath for herself, because the original owner was busy looking for food and didn't have the energy to take care of the house, and the spider webs in the house became a disaster. Now, the quilt and clothes have not been washed, the table on the floor is full of dust, the body is also very dirty, the hair is all messed up, and the whole body is chapped. Xiaoqiu worked very neatly. After a while, the water was boiled, poured into the water basin, and called Zhuang to take off his clothes to take a bath. Xiao Zhuang sat in the basin, Xiaoqiu took the towel and started to rub the mud, and as soon as he rubbed it down, the mud was scrambling to fall down, and there was no pancreas soap or the like. Xiaoqiu could only make do with a wash. Afraid of catching a cold, he quickly wiped his body and put on clean clothes for Zhuang. After hugging him onto the bed, Zhuang was already sleepy, and without a watch, Xiaoqiu couldn't tell what time it was. When he saw that it was already dark outside, he gently covered Zhuang with a quilt. Zhuang, who just lay down, was still not asleep, and called his mother uneasy, "Mother." Xiaoqiu didn't leave, patted Zhuang, and responded in a low voice. After coaxing her to sleep strong, Xiaoqiu closed the door and went back to the kitchen. The water in the pot was still hot, so she poured out the water in the basin first, then washed the hot water in the pot, and after everything was done, she was about to take off her coat. With a tinkling sound, something fell out of the inner pocket. Xiaoqiu squatted down and picked it up by the candle light. Ring? Is a ring. Xiaoqiu thought about it carefully. It seems that Zhang Danhe put it into the hands of the original owner after the wedding night, and he said that it was an ancestral ring inherited from the family, so that Xiaoqiu could keep it alive. The original owner sewed an inner pocket close to her body and stored it for fear of losing it. Xiaoqiu picked up the ring and tried it on her finger. Suddenly, she felt dizzy and passed out. Xiaoqiu opened her eyes again and was shocked by the scene in front of her. Did she travel back in time? The house that appeared in front of me was obviously a pre-apocalyptic house, and there were kitchen utensils and oil, salt, sauce, and vinegar. Xiaoqiu wandered around. Was it a dream? But it's so real. When he was about to take a bath, he fell out of the ring, put it on, and came back here. Before Xiaoqiu could understand why, she was pulled out of here. Xiaoqiu opened her eyes again and was still lying on the ground in the kitchen. There was a strong cry in her ears. Xiaoqiu quickly got up from the ground and ran out. When she opened the door, she saw that Zhuang on the bed had woken up, crying and crying. Woolen cloth. Zhuang, mother is here, what's wrong with my dear? Xiaoqiu hugged Zhuang in distress. Mother, wait for me to find something to eat together, you don't want to go alone, okay? Zhuang was obviously frightened by his mother falling into a coma in the morning. Okay, I won't go alone, be strong, let's sleep. Listening to Xiaoqiu's gentle voice, Zhuang gradually fell asleep in his mother's arms. After Zhuang fell asleep, Xiaoqiu gently put Zhuang down, sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Zhuang's sleepy little face. Only then did she have time to think about the abnormality just now. It was clearly related to that ring. Xiaoguo. Guo touched the ring all over his body, which he had just put on his hand. After he woke up, he was anxious to look at Zhuang, so he didn't pay attention to it. Now it seems that the ring that was just on his hand was in his palm in a blink of an eye. With a tentative mind, Xiaoqiu put the ring on her hand again, and was pulled into the ring as soon as she put it on. It turned out that the ring was a button connecting another dimension. Xiaoqiu found that the good news was not good. Now she and Zhuang don't have to worry about eating. She still has a lot of rice and noodles in her kitchen and a lot of meat in the refrigerator. In the last world, money was already wasted paper. What is useful is the spar in the zombie's head, and the spar can cultivate abilities, and those diners who eat at Xiaoqiu know that Xiaoqiu can't use the spar, so they basically use the pigs, ducks, and chickens found outside. The fish pays for the cooking expenses, so Xiaoqiu has saved a lot of meat. After reading the kitchen, Xiaoqiu hasn't gone to look elsewhere. I don't know if she followed the kitchen together. But when she looked at the small place, Xiaoqiu couldn't walk to the end, she just spun around in the same place. Looking at this scene, Xiaoqiu understood that only this kitchen can move around. Xiaoqiu is just curious now. I don't know if the meat here can be taken out. After thinking about it, Xiaoqiu took a knife and cut a piece of pork, took a small bag of white noodles, and was ready to go out. Hey, wait, how do I get out? How did you get out at that time? Curiosity spun around and cleared her throat. According to her experience, she could go out just by chanting a spell on TV, ahem, open sesame. After an eerie silence. Is the spell wrong? Xiaoqiu thought about it carefully, and shouted 2 other spells, but it didn't work. It might not be enough to just say go out. Before she could finish speaking, Xiaoqiu returned to the outside together with the pork white noodles. She opened her eyes and saw Zhuang sleeping beside her, with black lines all over her face. It turned out that it was really that simple. Xiaoqiu stood up slowly, returned to the kitchen with the pork white noodles, added a handful of firewood to the stove, washed herself when the water boiled, then put the pork and white noodles into the pot together, and closed the lid. Going to eat wontons early in the morning. After finishing everything, Xiaoqiu also felt a little tired, so she went back to the bedroom and gently went to bed and lay beside Zhuang Zhuang. Small forehead hugged Zhuang Zhuang and fell asleep. At dawn the next day, Xiaoqiu heard the sound of chickens crowing outside. She opened her eyes and saw that Zhuang Zhuang was still soundly asleep. She got up softly, closed the door and walked to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. I took out the pork from last night and chopped it into minced meat. I rummaged through the kitchen and found no onion and seasoning. Xiaoqiu entered the ring again. I took the onion, and various seasonings from the kitchen and came out of the ring. Put the bottles and jars in place, then start to chop ginger, minced green onions, put them in a pot, add a little salt, add a little monosodium glutamate, light soy sauce and 13 fragrances, soak the onion in water and pour them in one by one, along the way. Stir in one direction, and finally fry a little pepper oil and pour it on to enhance the fragrance and lock the moisture, so that the meat filling is lumpy and juicy. After mixing the stuffing, prepare to knead the dough. After kneading the dough into a smooth dough, Xiaoqiu saw that the sun was slowly rising outside and added water to set it on fire. On the other side, Zhuang Zhuang opened his eyes and didn't see his mother. The anxious little man ran out of bed to look for his mother. Looking for the voice, Zhuang Zhuang came to the kitchen, looked at Xiaoqiu who was busy, and shouted, "Mother!" Xiaoqiu turned around when she heard the voice, and saw that Zhuang Zhuang had woken up. "I got up very early, and my mother said that I will call you when the meal is ready." Zhuang Zhuang thought that my mother was going out to find something to eat again. Seeing that my mother was making breakfast, I immediately felt relieved. "Mother, I will go out with you after dinner." Going out. Xiaoqiu remembered that she still had to find something to eat. "No need, mother has already found something to eat. We don't have to go out to find something in the future." "Really?" Zhuang Zhuang looked at Xiaoqiu brightly, and Xiaoqiu smiled. "Of course it's true." "That's great, I'll help my mother make the fire." After speaking, he carried the pony and sat in front of the stove. Xiaoqiu said, "Yes, then you boil the water well, and after a while, we will cook the wontons." Only then did Zhuang Zhuang look up at the table. "Wontons? Really wontons?" Zhuang Zhuang stared at the little wontons on the table. He hadn't eaten wontons for a long time, and Zhuang Zhuang filled with firewood with great energy. Xiaoqiu's wontons were also wrapped in water, so I told Zhuang Zhuang to stand far away so that they don't burn them. When Zhuang Zhuang left the pot, Xiaoqiu started to make wontons. After placing the pot, Xiaoqiu quickly stirred it to prevent sticking to the pot. The fragrance of the water also floated out, and Zhuang Zhuang's greedy saliva was about to flow out. She kept asking her if she was okay. Xiaoqiu saw that Zhuang Zhuang was about to fall into the pot, so she said to Zhuang Zhuang, "You help my mother take out the bowls and chopsticks." Zhuang Zhuang turned around and went there. "Mother, are you familiar?" Xiaoqiu nodded. "She has rice. There are 2 bowls, one big and one small." Xiaoqiu put some seaweed and dried shrimp at the bottom of the bowl, and ordered a few drops of sesame oil. Zhuang Zhuang looked at the bottles and jars he had never seen before, and was curious about what it was. Before I could ask, I was attracted by the wontons coming out of the pot. The aroma was fragrant, and 2 bowls of warm wontons came out of the pot. Zhuang Zhuang tried to help his mother serve the bowl, but Xiaoqiu couldn't compete with him, so he asked him to take chopsticks. The 2 came to the dining table, took advantage of the heat and took 2 breaths, and couldn't wait to stuff them into their mouths. Seeing this, Xiaoqiu quickly said to Zhuang Zhuang, "Eat slowly, don't burn yourself." Zhuang Zhuang nodded while chewing wontons, and Li's little man's eyes narrowed into slits. Xiaoqiu was also very happy. Seeing Zhuang Zhuang enjoying the meal, she felt her appetite was widening. She followed Zhuang Zhuang and ate 2 bowls, draining all the soup in the pot. After eating, the two slumped on the chairs again, and their stomachs were all round. Xiaoqiu was afraid that the support would be bad and strong, so she rubbed his stomach and burped 3 or 4 times in a row, and then she felt relieved. Zhuang didn't let his mother wash the dishes, so he took the bowl and walked to the kitchen. Xiaoqiu followed him all the way to the kitchen. Zhuang washed the dishes. The stove is too high, he can't touch it now, so he can only brush, so he assured Xiaoqiu, "Mother, I will grow up quickly and take care of my mother." Xiaoqiu was moved again. She was originally a soloist in the mother's fetus. She had planned not to find a boyfriend before, and she would go for a test tube when she was old. Now, it's good that she can get such a caring eldest son for free, not yet. The kind of husband, I once again thank the dead original owner and the dead ghost husband in my heart. The mother and son, who have had enough to eat and drink, are preparing to clean up. As the old saying goes, a new life and a new look. In this era, there were not many courtyard walls made of bricks in the village, and Dahua village was the only one, thanks to Zhang Shanhe's long-dead father. Before the fall of the Zhang family, he was the richest man, but at that time he was victimized by a traitor, and his family fortune was rich. They were all scattered and came to Dahua village with only a little money, most of which were used to buy land and build houses. Xiaoqiu took Zhuang around. It was dark when he came, and he was busy eating, so he didn't have time to look around. This will be clear in the next turn. The 3 main rooms face south, facing the door in the middle is the room for eating, the one in the east is the room where Jiang's mother lived before her death, the one in the west is the room where Xiaoqiu lived, and the room where Jiang's mother lived was 3 meters away. The place is the kitchen. The yard is very big, and there are vegetable fields, but because it has been abandoned for a long time, Xiaoqiu is more satisfied that there is a well in the yard. I fetched water, and I dug it out bit by bit. After getting acquainted with it, Xiaoqiu led Zhuang, who was fully armed, to start the cleaning work. The two first moved the furniture out of the house. It had not been in the sun for a long time. Taste. There is a well at home and there is no shortage of water, and Xiaoqiu doesn't save it. Let Zhuang go to get the brush at home. Taking advantage of this kung fu, Xiaoqiu takes out the detergent from the ring, and is going to use the detergent instead of the laundry detergent. It was then that I discovered that I had nothing to clean my clothes at home. After Xiaoqiu came out, Zhuang just happened to come out. He obediently handed it to his mother, and asked crisply, "Mother, what else should I do?" I originally wanted to say that I don't need mother to do it, but looking at Zhuang's bright eyes, he hesitated again, and looked around to see if there was anything Zhuang could help with, then go and help mother get the laundry tub and laundry hammer. Zhuang replied okay and ran into the back room happily. Xiaoqiu didn't stop in his hand, and quickly drew 2 buckets of water from the well. After Zhuang brought the basin, Xiaoqiu poured the water into the basin. It's very big, so Xiaoqiu went back to the house and took out the dirty clothes from the closet and the dirty clothes that she changed last night. As soon as she went out, she saw the maza that Zhuang had brought out. She stood beside the maza and looked at Xiao with a smile. Guo, with an expression like a puppy waiting to be praised, thought of this, and Xiao Guo burst out laughing. Mother! Zhuang didn't know why she laughed again. It seems that she has loved to laugh at herself since she woke up yesterday, which is different from before. Mother used to sigh, and I really want her to keep laughing like this. Xiaoqiu didn't know Zhuang's thoughts, so she walked over to encourage her and pinched her still thin face. Zhuang is great. I know how to help my mother with her work and my mother's maza, and my mother feels very happy. Being praised by her mother, Zhuang blushed shyly. What's this? I have to do a lot of things for my mother. When I grow up, I will wash and cook for my mother. Xiaoqiu is so cute for Zhuang's manly words, then I'll wait for Zhuang to grow up. Well, I will grow up quickly. Zhuang assured Xiaoqiu. Xiaoqiu was sitting on the maza to wash clothes. Zhuang looked at him and suddenly turned around and ran to the kitchen. Xiaoqiu didn't know what he was doing, and ran back shortly after turning around to wash the clothes. Sitting behind Xiaoqiu with the maza in his hand, two small hands hammer Xiaoqiu's waist. Xiaoqiu looked back at Zhuang in amazement. This kid is too sensible. Zhuang beat his waist seriously, with a serious expression and a small frown, as if he was doing something serious. With the warm-hearted Zhuang company, Xiaoqiu was very motivated and quickly washed the clothes, took off the quilt and washed the sheets and pillowcases, and brushed the furniture by the way. It was the weather in May, not cold or not. It's hot and the sun is just right, and it can be put into the house in the evening. Mother, you are so good. Zhuang looked at the clothes and quilts hanging on the rope, which were full of ropes. Of course, it's also because Zhuang gives the hammer a comfortable waist. My mother is not tired at all because of Zhuang. Xiaoqiu stretched her limbs, and she was not very tired. When Zhuang heard this, he jumped up happily, very happy that he could help his mother. Xiaoqiu turned her head to look at the sky. I don't know what time it is, the sun has just risen and hung in the sky. Xiaoqiu turned her head to look at Zhuang and asked tentatively, Zhuang, do you know this moment? What time is it? Xiaoqiu didn't expect Zhuang to give an answer, so she just asked tentatively, but Zhuang glanced at the sun and said, it's 2 o'clock now. Xiaoqiu looked at Zhuang in surprise, how do you know so accurately? When my mother went out, I was afraid at home alone, so I looked at the sun and counted how long it would take for my mother to come back. Zhuang replied casually, but Xiaoqiu sounded a little embarrassed. The original owner was looking for food before. They all go out when it's not dawn and other people are still sleeping. If they go out early, they may find more, but when they were young and strong, they woke up and couldn't find their mother, so they counted the hours on their own. Xiaoqiu squatted down and kept looking at Zhuang, firmly assured Zhuang, son, my mother will take you with you wherever you go. Sure enough, when he heard this sentence, Zhuang's eyes lit up immediately, really? Really? Mother? I love you the most, I love you the most. Zhuang hugged Xiaoqiu, shaking to express his joy and excitement. Xiaoqiu held Zhuang in her arms, and she was right. Zhuang was too insecure before, she was so young, she couldn't see her mother when she opened her eyes, and she was so scared at home alone, she always said that she could help her with work. Not just to tell my mother that I have to take him with me in the future, and he can help my mother share it. It was still early. Looking at the barren vegetable field, Xiaoqiu wanted to grow and order vegetables. She couldn't always rely on the things in the space to live. Although there were a lot of seasonings in it, the things she could eat were limited after all. Thinking like this, Xiaoqiu felt that she still needed some money in her hand. The money she had saved before was used for Jiang's mother's funeral, and now she has nothing in her hand. If she grows vegetables, she doesn't know if there are any seeds at home. Xiaoqiu, who was thinking about things, heard a knock at the door. Is Jiang's daughter-in-law at home? Xiaoqiu wondered who it was, so she opened the door after searching for a sound. Sister-in-law Yang. Outside the door is the elder sister-in-law of the Yang family next door. You're at home, I didn't see you going out yesterday. I wanted to see if something happened. Sister Yang looked at Xiaoqiu worriedly. The men in the village were not at home, and the women in the village could take care of each other. I didn't see Xiaoqiu going out to find food for a few days, so I was a little worried. A young man brought a child, and he came over to take a look when he was afraid that something happened to the mother and child. Xiaoqiu felt warm in her heart. I'm fine, I just took a day off yesterday, but I'm fine now. That's it. Sister Yang breathed a sigh of relief, and suddenly remembered something when she patted her head, and said happily, by the way, every household in the village distributed a bag of wheat seeds yesterday, so I will give you one. Take it. As he spoke, he took out a cloth bag from the basket. It was sent from the county, and the old village chief said that it was the disaster relief crops distributed by the capital households to the villagers all over the country. The natural disaster has passed, and people have to live normally. If the seeds are not sent, you don't have to worry about what to eat. Sister-in-law Yang took something out of the basket as she spoke. You take this, I bought it from the county yesterday, and this one I grew at home, although it's not much, it's enough for you to eat twice. Xiaoqiu took a bag of things, a small bag of rice, cucumbers, tomatoes, and 2 eggs. This, no, it's too expensive, I can't have Mrs. Yang, you can keep it, Xiahua and Xiahu. At home, I can't have it. As he talked, he stuffed them into the basket. These things are too precious now, when every family is short of food, not to mention that Mrs. Yang's family has an old mother and 2 children, and the population is much more compact than her own. Sister-in-law Yang stopped Xiaoqiu's hand. We have 2 men in our family. We have 2 taels of silver every month, which is a lot more comfortable, not to mention that we can farm the land now. Our family has a few more seeds than your family. Take it easy, take it. Without waiting for Xiaoqiu to refuse again, the 2 pulled sister-in-law Zhong Yang into Xiaoqiu's arms, pushed the basket and ran away. While running, they waved at Xiaoqiu, go back, go back. Xiaoqiu accepted the things, and looked at Mrs. Yang's disappearing figure with emotion, and promised to repay her in the future. But how do neighbors communicate with each other? It's a headache when she came here from the end of the world, she really couldn't get used to it all at once. Just after turning around and closing the door, Zhuang ran out of the room. Mother, is that Aunt Yang? Did you bring us food again? Yes, they brought us a lot of things. A long time ago, Mrs. Yang's family couldn't eat, and it was the old couple of the Zhang family who supported them every day to make a living. The Yang family remembered their kindness, so after the death of Zhang Danhe and Jiang's mother, Xiaoqiu was left with Zhuang and Yang. The family often helps the 2 mothers and sons when they are not rich at all. I remember this kindness, and I will definitely repay them when I have the opportunity. Xiaoqiu and Zhuang took the food to the kitchen, and Zhuang, who put down the rice bag, felt that something was separating him. Mother, what is this? Zhuang handed over a small bag. Xiaoqiu opened it and saw that it was actually a copper plate. After counting, there were 30 coins. Xiaoqiu thought that Sister Yang had just handed it over together. This. Xiaoqiu was moved to look at the copper plate in her hand, and was a little speechless for a while. Since Zhang Danhe died on the battlefield, the Zhang family had no money in the account, and the death of Jiang's mother also spent the last bit of money. Sister Yang must know these things, so it was quietly stuffed into the dish and delivered. Xiaoqiu wanted to send the money back, but after thinking about it, she didn't have a penny in her hand. If she wanted to make money, she had to have some capital in her hand. Xiaoqiu left these 30 coins, and it will be doubled in the future. Go back. After collecting the money, Xiaoqiu led Zhuang out the door, wanting to go to the field to see if any seeds were sown. When they came to the field, they saw that someone had already sown seeds. When people saw Xiaoqiu and the 2, they all said hello. Xiaoqiu responded one by one and walked to their own land. The family next door said to Xiaoqiu, look at the weather. It should be raining the day after tomorrow, so Xiaoqiu is also planted quickly, and when it rains, it is just poured. Xiaoqiu thought about it too. She only has 2 seeds at home, so it's easy to plant them. Now it's early. She discussed with Zhuang whether to plant them first, and Zhuang said that she would help her mother to plant them together. The 2 quickly went home to get a hoe, Xiaoqiu hoeing in front, Zhuang helping to sow seeds in the back. Xiaoqiu accelerated the speed of hoeing the pit, and let Zhuang spread slowly. When Xiaoqiu finished hoeing a piece of land, he didn't stop, took the seeds from Zhuang's hand, and asked Zhuang to sit on the ground and not run far. In this way, Xiaoqiu watched Zhuang while sowing the seeds. Seeing the child sitting obediently on the ground waiting for him, Xiaoqiu felt relieved and quickened her movements. It may be that the healing power in the last days follows his soul, and Xiaoqiu does not feel tired even if he keeps working, and when all the seeds are planted, it is exactly the size of a field. Because the Zhang family is an outsider, there is such a large area when they are allocated. It is not big, but it is very small in this area. Xiaoqiu thinks it is just right. When the food comes out, this area is just enough for their mother and son to eat. Xiaoqiu rubbed her waist and stood up, picked up her and walked towards Zhuang. Let's go home Zhuang. Zhuang stood up and held his mother's hand. Xiaoqiu looked at the son, lowered her head and asked Zhuang, are you hungry? I have been working without realizing it. Now it seems that the sun has risen to a high place. It should be noon now. Seeing that everyone in the surrounding fields has gone home, it should be time for lunch. Zhuang shook his head obediently. I'm not hungry, mother, you've worked hard, I'll beat your back when you go back. Zhuang's sweet and greasy words made Xiaoqiu overjoyed. This little warm man, mother hears our Zhuang words and feels that I have countless strengths, and I won't feel tired if I'm tired. Zhuang listened to Xiaoqiu's words with blushing cheeks and thought happily, mother is so nice. Zhuang, who had just finished saying that he was not hungry, let out a grunt, and Xiao Zhuang immediately covered his stomach and smiled shyly at Xiaoqiu. His face that had been red just now turned even redder, and Xiaoqiu squeezed it gently. Zhuang's little nose, what Zhuang didn't tell his mother was that in fact, his little belly had been screaming for a long time just now. The mother and son walked home and drew a basin of water from the well. They washed their hands first, and then called Zhuang to come out to wash their hands. While Zhuang was washing hands, Xiaoqiu came to the kitchen again, thinking about what to eat at noon. I looked at the tomatoes, eggs, and yellow flowers on the table, and there was still dough left in the pot in the morning, so let's eat tomato and braised noodles. As soon as she said it, Xiaoqiu rolled up her sleeves and started washing the vegetables. When Zhuang came over, the vegetables had already been cut. Zhuang asked her mother what she was doing. After thinking about it, Xiaoqiu picked up a bowl and beat a bowl. Inside, the egg said to Zhuang, you help your mother to beat the eggs, just beat in one direction. Xiaoqiu seriously taught Zhuang how to beat eggs, and Zhuang also learned seriously. Heat the pot, wait for the pot to be hot, put in the cut fat meat to squeeze oil, put in chopped green onion after weaving out the oil, throw in the tomatoes, fry out the red water and add the strong beaten eggs, the fragrance will blow upon you as soon as you put it in, Zhuang greedily drooling on the side of the pot. Xiaoqiu looked at Zhuang with a funny look, shoveled out a piece of egg from the pot, blew it, and handed it to Zhuang. Zhuang ate it in one bite. Have a good bite. Zhuang's mouth was full of eggs, and he couldn't speak clearly. Xiaoqiu looked at Zhuang with a funny look, eat slowly. Put the vegetables out and let them cool, then add water to the pot, sit on the side and burn the fire, sprinkle them on the board and start rolling the noodles, first roll them into dough, then stack them and cut them into noodles with the same width and width. Just when the water was boiling, Xiaoqiu was afraid that Zhuang would be too hot to keep him away, so he started to make noodles. Waiting for the noodles to be cooked, Xiaoqiu took another cucumber, chopped it into shreds, and Zhuang watched from the side. A surprised voice came out of his mouth. Wow Shui Kai. Xiaoqiu took a large basin, filled with cold water, and fished the noodles into the cold water so that the noodles would be stronger. After preparing the meal, Zhuang ran to the back room with 2 bowls and chopsticks in his hand. He couldn't wait to prepare to eat. Xiaoqiu called Zhuang to slow him down with a loaf behind him. Xiaoqiu gave Zhuang a bowl first, and Zhuang took it and ate it anxiously. He didn't bother to say a word, because it was so delicious. Mother, why are the noodles so delicious? After thinking about it, Xiaoqiu couldn't directly say that it was because she was a cook, so she jokingly said, is it because my mother made it? Unexpectedly, Zhuang thought about it seriously, nodded heavily, and agreed, definitely. Xiaoqiu pinched her bulging mouth because she was eating. Eat slowly, don't choke. After the mother and son finished eating, they looked at Zhuang who had to close their eyes, so they insisted on washing the dishes. Xiaoqiu reluctantly promised Zhuang that he would wait for him to wake up before brushing, that he would not secretly brush. It was funny looking at Zhuang thinking. He asked, can I take a nap first? After Xiaoqiu coaxed Zhuang to sleep, she walked out of the room alone, washed the dishes, and cleaned the inside and outside of the kitchen again. After doing all this, she didn't feel tired at all, so she went back to the house and covered Zhuang with the quilt. And then walked into the room to the east that used to be Jiang's mother. It was clean and there was nothing in it. It is a custom in Peach Blossom Village. Burn together. Xiaoqiu is ready to turn this room into a Zhuang room when she has money in her hand. After all, Zhuang is 3 years old this year, and it is not suitable to live in the same room with her when she grows up. Xiaoqiu will be in the future. Write it down in the things to do. Xiaoqiu cleaned all the rooms, and Zhuang woke up at this time, mother looking at Zhuang rubbing his eyes and coming out of the house, the cute and loving child. I don't know if it is because of his mother's love filter, but looking at the black and thin child in front of him, he still thinks it is so cute. After several meals in a row, I was full. Although there was no major change, in Xiaoqiu's view, the child was more energetic, not like the sick and wilted yesterday. She hugged Zhuang and rubbed a few times in her arms. When Zhuang recovered, Xiaoguo asked him, would you like to go out with my mother for a walk? Zhuang looked at Xiaoqiu brightly, okay. He also hadn't gone out with his mother for a long time.